extension prevention, monitor conditions and reports for cues to strategy modification. This is where I got to be listening because my people are inside the building, right? I always want to try and use the safest, most effective path of least resistance to put a fire out. Like on the picture on the left, they're stretching in through the front door, right? What's that going to do for us? It's going to push the fire out the back, attack from the unburned side, protect the stairs, protect the firefighters searching. If I stretched it anywhere else there, it probably wouldn't do all those things. What other problem do I have there in that picture? I got an exposure issue, right? So I'm going to need a line in that alley, and I'm going to need lines inside that building too, and I'm going to need what? A Delta Division supervisor, right? Okay? The stairs. Got to control those stairs, man. That captain that fell through that window, this was that fire. Fire roared out of that basement, up these stairs. The door was over to the right. They had closed it. Searching, closed the door. Probably saved their life. That fire would have swept in and just wiped them out, right? Path of least resistance, if the others are not available, right? We always try and take people out the interior stairs. It's the easiest way. But if those interior stairs are not safe anymore, even though they're path of least resistance, we have to go to other places. Aerial ladders, ground ladders. And the more we deviate from the path of least resistance, the more dangerous it is, the more time it takes, and the more people we need to get it done. So, you know, we have to make sure that we try and do it the proper way, and sometimes we can't, but if we do it in this manner, where we're deviating from that path of least resistance, we have to make sure we have the resources to get that done. Think about a rope rescue. How many people you need to pull off a rope rescue, right? As compared to walking somebody out of a building down the stairs. One person, right? Or one cop, right? All right. Keep the access points clear. So nobody can get out, nobody can get in here. Something bad happens, we got big problems. Big problems. All right. Strategy modification. We went offensive. Maybe it's not working so good. So let's look at what's going on. We can't find the fire in a timely manner. Guys, bottles are starting to ring. Coming out of the building, we still haven't found the fire, right? The fire we had in Union City that went to 8 alarms, they were looking for this fire for about 50 minutes. It was in an area in this basement that had no windows. It was an add-on to the building. They were looking for it for a long time. And it, just told you, like, you know what? At some point, you got to do what? Back out. Let's give it up, right? Okay. Evidence of conditions worsen even though water's being applied. Hey, Chief, we got water on this thing. It's going good. You know, we're knocking it down, and I'm looking, and there's smoke coming from 3 different areas of the building. You know, you ever have the chief call you out of the building, and you're like, man, you know, we had this thing, and you go outside, you look up, there's 3 floors going. You know, remember when you're in your building, all you see is a little box that you were assigned to, but there's a much bigger picture, right? All right. Forcible entry difficulty, ventilation difficulty, water supply problems. Any of these things going on, and we're in an offensive mode, we have to be considering that maybe we might have to pull out, right? What else? Flashover, structural compromise. You got to be able to read that smoke. Operations that eat up personnel, a tough rescue, which we spoke about before. What's not getting done with a tough rescue? Fires in attached buildings with any of the above concerns just because they're attached, right? And then sometimes just your gut, your experience, make that call. We can always go back in. But being out 5 minutes early is better than 5 seconds late, right? It's always critical during offensive ops because our people are inside the building, right? Look at this building. Asphalt siding. It's like gasoline on the side of the building, right? This started outside, and in a matter of minutes, this whole thing was involved. They lost that building too. We were going to the FDIC that day. We actually saw this fire from the plane. From the plane, you could see this thing. You could see the flames rolling, right? What else? Offensive, defensive, all right? Immediate primary search because we have more area to be concerned with, all right? Major portion of our people are operating on the fire, but a smaller portion initially will tend to exposure control. Working in those exposures, maybe using a line on a detached exposure, may require reinforcement based on reports. This is where I might send a captain into an exposure, you know, and now he gives me a report that we actually have, you know, a good amount of fire in there. Now I got to start reinforcing, right? This is where I start sending my division commanders in, right? Attached buildings. All right, look, this is a classic offensive defensive fire, right? Now, which one do you protect first? We have an attached on the left, and we have a wood frame on the right. Which one do we protect first? How many people say the left? How many the right? How many hope they got enough companies to cover both? Yeah, me too. This, you know what it's going to depend on? It's going to depend on reports, right? Good apparent reports. I'm going to get companies into that fire building with an interior division, companies on a roof with a roof division, people in the exposure here. If it was on a lower floor, I wouldn't be so concerned, but the top floor could be an open cock loft, right? On the right, halfway down that building, there's probably a little half shaft with a bunch of windows in it exposing this wood frame wall. So I got to get a lot of reports before I can really put all my ducks where they need to go. But if I'm thinking in that direction, initially, I'm going to start sending people there, all right? Here's my strategy for attached buildings. First of all, put somebody in charge of it, whether it's a captain or eventually a chief. Check if the shafts, search it and evacuate it, get protective lines inside, vent it, coordinate that vent so we don't have any cockloft backdrafts, check for extension, do salvage and get reports. When I tell my chief officers, you got the delta exposure, that's what they understand that I mean, all right? And what do you need to do that? You need engine companies, you need ladder companies, right, to get all that done. Right? Usually 2 engines and a ladder will suffice, but maybe 1 and 1, right? Okay? Failure to pay attention to your exposures. Not good. Not good. Remember, radiant heat can catch buildings very, very quickly, right? This was a fire we had, and you can't even see the fire building behind that engine. This fire was burning so hard when we pulled up. It was a 1-story repair garage. It was burning so hard that the poles were on fire. It was licking up against that B exposure on the left-hand side. The smoke was so thick, our dispatching center is down the block. When they opened the door, that whole dispatching center got full of smoke. They struck the second alarm at dispatch, which never has been done before. Of course, they were talked about it. But you know why that building over there on the left-hand side didn't ignite? One of the reasons, we had to make rescues in there. We had smoke all over the place. Couldn't even see it. But you know why that wall didn't ignite? 2 reasons. 1, first engine company opened up a deck gun on that wall as the first line. Second reason, asbestos siding. You guys have any of that? Doesn't burn. It's beautiful. Beautiful stuff. Not necessarily the same as asphalt siding. Asphalt siding burns like that building we saw. This was one we had with 3 buildings that were attached to the front but not at the back. And we pulled up, heavy smoke blowing over the top. Luckily, the first captain had the mindset to take a look in the back, and the first 2 lines stretched with 2.5s to the back to knock down all that wall fire. Then I think we stretched like 15 lines here. We had lines in it, had 3 buildings up on a roof, and the exposure behind this, all the siding melted on that, and that was about 15 feet behind it. Luckily, the wind wasn't blowing that way. We've been chasing that down the block. But when you have this asphalt siding, these wall fires going, you got to knock them down because they create a lot of radiant heat, and it creates a big exposure problem for you. Oh, there's the exposure. That was the exposure about 10 feet away. And underneath that siding was more asphalt siding that luckily they swept out with the stream when they got back there. All right? How about that? Now, how much distance you think there is between that building and those exposures over there? It's a pretty decent amount of distance though, right? I mean, it's got to be about 75 feet, right? Yeah, and nobody's paying attention to them, right? There you go. Right? Look at the transformers going there too. They lost those 3 buildings too. But what happened was they were using some small diameter hose lines at the front. Nobody went around to look at the back, and before they knew it, they had this thing going. So make sure, this is again, reports. Get the reports. Send people all over the place to get the reports, right? Closely spaced. Got a building here. It's another building 10 feet away, 5 feet away. Very similar to the other one with the attached buildings, but here we want to make sure we have an exposure line in place. And watch the soffits. The soffits, what's covering the soffit a lot? That vent. And what's it made of? Plastic, right? Yeah, plastic melts, the fire's in the soffit. What happens now, you got an attic fire, right? So if you got that exposure line, make sure you're sweeping those soffits. But again, we got to get lines inside that exposure, close the windows, remove stuff, vent the unexposed sides. Very similar to the other one, but we got space in between. So we got to get a line in there too. And the line has to actually wash that wall. It can't just sit in between and, wet the air. It's got to actually wash that wall, right? Like, look at this here, right? Got a good porch fire going here, right? Got a line, they're putting a line right there on the right-hand side. Now, what could you use here to help you out? The deck gun, right? Let's take our deck gun. We can actually sweep this fire a little bit, and we can protect that exposure at the same time, right? Good strategy. Good strategy here. That's a defensive-offensive strategy, actually, right? Okay. Here's defensive-offensive. Now, that's more of a holding action. Holding in a usually defensive until we get more people. That's sort of the definition, but sometimes we're doing other things. Now look at our primary search here. Now we only got a limited primary search in areas that are tenable because things are not so good, right? Blitz attack is sometimes used here, all right? Or fire spreading up a combustible exterior. Like look at this here, right? Now, 3-story building. We have life hazards upstairs, right? We got to get lines upstairs too, right? What else do we have to do here? What do you need to do like immediately? You got to knock that down. Because if you don't knock that down, what are the conditions going to be like upstairs? Right? So we got to hit that defensively first. It may be steamy and everything else upstairs, but much better than people being, fricasseed and, everything else to death, right? One problem you see here is look at the aerial. See the aerial up there? Going right up, right? Can't see it that well. There's an aerial right there. Be careful of your aerial positioning. There's also a ground ladder right in the fire, so that fire vented after the guys got there. Be careful about where the fire is, and now nobody's coming down that aerial, and nobody's going up that aerial, and you're probably damaging it through the heat, because an aerial is nothing more than unprotected steel. Combustible walls, right? Same thing here. This is a fire we had, went to 3 alarms, porch going, burning the wall, first line, sweep the outside first. Knock down that wall fire, then stretch inside. Especially if you only if you got 1 line, that's the best way to do it. You got 2 lines, 1 line can stay outside. Don't enter the windows with the line, just sweep the wall. Once the wall's knocked down, shut the line down, right? Defensive, exterior operations, no primary. So we went from a good primary to no primary, right? Outside the collapse zones, exposure protection is going to be our priority here, and our decision is generally made on where is it and how big is it, what are our exposures, how many people do I got, and what's my water supply. Any limitation there is generally going to push us more towards that defensive spectrum, all right? No attack, right? Our job is to attack, right? We're aggressive people, but there are times when we get ourselves in big trouble when we take aggressive actions when we shouldn't, right? Hazard's so great, intervention may create more problems than it sets out to solve, like pesticides, right? Pesticides on fire, what do we do with those? Let them burn, right? Let them burn. Explosives involved, that's a loser, right? Everybody stay away. Lack of water supply, proper extinguishing agent. Can't do anything with it, right? The mark of the true pro is to recognize that your incident's best handled by someone else. The other ones we look at is when it's beyond the scope of our ability to handle. For instance, a hazmat, a building collapse, a terrorist incident, utilities, tech rescue. You guys have a tech rescue team? Yeah. Hazmat too? Hazmat too, yeah? See, we don't have hazmat, we have tech rescue, but we know that not all of our companies are trained in tech rescue. So, the idea, don't get people in over their head, like confined space, things like that. How many people get killed in confined space because their emotions take over? They go in a hole because they see their buddy down there, No good, no good. So what do? We call in, we protect life, call in the experts to mitigate, and we usually operate in a support role, right? This was a trench rescue we had right when we first regionalized, and we really didn't have the capability. We called Jersey City and Portaferry to come help us out. This guy fell in a trench and all the gravestones fell on top of him. And he was like this. And what it was almost like, you ever play pick-up sticks where if you move one, another will move? So they actually had it all right, if we move this tombstone, what happens to this one, what happens now? So it was a real delicate operation, and we really didn't have the expertise. So we brought some people in that we knew did have some expertise, and it was pulled off pretty well. This was it pulled them out a little bit roughly, but it got pulled off pretty well. Don't get in over your head if you don't really understand it. Somebody will. All right, modification. And then we're going to cover post-control. Strategy modification has to be open-ended. You got to be thinking that if things aren't going our way, how am I going to switch from offensive to defensive? It takes some steps to do. You can't just all of a sudden open up deck guns and master streams and hope people are out of the way. Right? So it's not a closed-end decision. You have to have it, as an IC, a what-if mentality. And you need to have a couple of plans in your back pocket, right? And it can't be a crisis. Modification, like that one we talked about without warning, the conditions deteriorating and everybody's jumping out of windows and stuff. That can't be happening. If that's happening, you didn't do a good risk analysis while you had the chance, right? This is a fire we had in North Bergen before regionalization. Literally coming from the Meadowlands, like where Giant Stadium is, our area is New York City on the one side and the Meadowlands on the other, and it's cliffs on the one and big, big hills on the other. we're the second hilliest place next to San Francisco. And this was on the top of the hill on the western slope. And the wind's blowing in with like 50 miles an hour. I was a division commander here, coming on mutual aid. And we were trying to get down the hallway because the fire was in the back. And we had to wrap around to get to the fire. And the wind coming out of us was like incredible, incredible wind. And we tried to get down with 1 3/4 inches, then 2 3/4 inches, how to withdraw. The water on the floor was steaming in the apartment. Finally, we were bringing up a 2.5, but we didn't realize the fire had actually extended to the floor above. So the incident commander withdrew us, did a roll call, and we actually withdrew down to the floor below. We went, everybody was in a safe spot, and they opened up the telesquirt, operated in a defensive mode, right? But there was a lot of fire in the apartment. So what they did was we took a hand line, 2.5, and we went to the apartment next to it. Came out on a fire escape. Obviously, after all the telesquirt was done and the fire was somewhat knocked down, we went back to an offensive mode but attacked from a different direction, right? And we came off this fire escape, and you can still see this fire in there, but it's blowing which way? Now it's going the other way. And we just advanced in and put the fire. There were some holes in the floor because it was being renovated, which we didn't know about, but we identified them at the, when we saw them. Nobody fell through them, but this was a point where we went offensive to defensive, back to offensive, and it was a very smooth transition. We had a good incident commander. We had good division reports. We had very good coordination between the chief officers. You don't always see that happen, and the reason I talk about this fire is because it worked so well. But if you're going to go offensive, defensive, back to offensive, you have to sort of slow everything down, make sure everybody's aware, then go back into work. Command progress report. This is what I'm doing. I talked about when I get my division progress reports, I give my command progress report. And it's usually information from the operational areas. And it covers basically the same stuff we covered before. Where are my lines now? What's the ventilation? Where are my searches? What am I doing with that? And my incident status. So it's very much the same report as I gave before. It's just going to be more information because we're further on in the incident. All right? And when the ladder pipe's going up, we're doubtful. That's a doubtful will hold right there. All right, bottom line. And we're going to talk about post control. Absolutely no way the IC, me, or this gentleman back here, can evaluate the effectiveness of an operation without timely and concise reports from the working companies. I'm depending, and this is an expectation you have to set, I'm depending on you guys to tell me what's happening so I can support you. I'm depending on my chief officers to show up in gear and understand they're going to be working in divisions so that they can support me and support the people inside those buildings. It works out pretty well, right? Post-control operations are those operations that occur once we have gained a proper handle on the incident is de-escalating, we have the operation stabilized. But it's a really important part because parts that we miss in the post-control operations often lead to things that could be as bad as rekindle or as complicated as litigation. So I always had an acronym for my post-control operations. I used to call it ROS, TOS, DMT, D. And when we go through the post-ops, you'll see that's actually the first letters of all of the things in post-operations. I'd write it right on a command board, and I would cross them out as I go because I wanted to make sure I was thorough in my post-control operations because it just made me look better and made the department look better. So do yourself a favor, pay close attention to what you're doing once the fire is under control because it will probably serve you and your department well, whether it's today, tonight, tomorrow, or at a future time. Last thing we're going to talk about is post-control operations, all right? We put the fire out. We did a good job. Nobody got hurt, all right? Now, our job is to, you ever know, like when the fire first starts, the people come up to you and we take information, then what do we do with them? Go over there somewhere. Now the fire's out, and what happens? Now the people come back, right? Now we got to talk to them again. So we talked about, how that last impression is really important, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about our personal interaction and our fireground operations. The first one here is the roll call, all right? We talked about the PAR earlier. If you're not doing a PAR every 20 minutes or a roll call, whatever it happens to be, at the very least, once the fire is under control, get a roll call, all right? Provides accountability. And like I said, we like to do the PARs while the fire is going on. And unless something weird like a collapse or a rapid fire or somebody bailing out, we generally won't do a roll call because it just takes a lot. If I have a lot of companies on scene, I may do one alarm worth of companies at a time. Give me a roll call of all first alarm companies. Give me a roll call of all second. But it provides accountability, reinforces company integrity, right? Because if you don't know where one of your guys are and you know we're giving you a roll call, what do you got to do? I got a roll call coming and one of your guys, you're not sure where he is. You better find out real fast or now we got a problem, right? Okay? Company should state the location. Engine 1, all personnel accounted for, operating on fire floor. Squad 7 accounted for at rehab. Now what I could do is I can update my command board just in case it's not updated. All right? What else? Safety survey. Once that fire is knocked down, I'm going to send in my battalion chief, maybe with another captain, and we're going to do a safety survey of this building. We're going to conduct it prior to overhaul. We're going to light up the area. We're going to rope off anything hazardous. We're going to do an urgent transmission if we have to. Be advised, everyone stay out of the rear. Everybody watch out for burned out stairs or emergency traffic as you guys would call it. Make that announcement over the radio, right? Maybe we'll suspend operations if necessary till daylight because you don't always want to overhaul at night. And plus then the next shift's got to do it, right? So we'll just keep a fire watch, right? But you know what? It's always going to be safer during the day. And when you do it again during the day, do another safety survey, all right? Secondary. Conducted and reported at all fires. Primary and secondary have to be reported because it's got to be on tape. Because say they find a body 2 days later or they find a body during secondary search and now you're in court 5 years later and they say, Chief, why didn't you do a primary? We do a primary every fire. Yeah, well, we have the tape. There's nothing on this tape saying there was a primary done, right? So if it's not on the tape, guess what? We didn't do it. So I want to make sure I document on tape my primary and my secondary, all right? Fresh personnel, if I can, whole building and area, because people do jump, right? So we want to make sure everybody's accounted for, right? Overhaul. Minimize your people in overhaul. Keep out the privileged spectators. You know the guys that just want to go in so they can show them, tell their mother they got in the game, wipe a little soot on their face, right? But otherwise you can't find them near the fireground, right? Keep those people... Minimize your people. Don't have 800 people in doing overhaul. Protect evidence, all right? Fresh crews, skeletonize, all right? I tell my companies, listen, if this room had fire in it, and I tell you to open a ceiling, you open a hole the size of a shoebox, you're going back in. I want the whole ceiling down, I want the walls down, I want everything down. I want this room absolutely skeletonized. Why? Because I don't want to rekindle and because they're going to have to renovate the place anyway. So, you know, expectations set. They understand. All right? Total losses don't require an overhaul, right? Like I had said, this particular fire, we didn't do an overhaul. We did a fire watch because the building was so gutted, all right? Don't risk your neck for something that's going into a dumpster. And while we were doing fire watch, the whole cornice came down, right across the front of 4 buildings. Luckily, nobody was there, right? This one here, when the ice melted, the buildings collapsed. So don't overhaul total loss. Let a bulldozer overhaul it. Don't be standing on the walls that can collapse. You know, there was an incident on the East Coast not too long ago where the fire was under control. They had a major fire in a huge warehouse, and there was a 1-story extension next to it, a 1-story building next to it. Guys went inside the building to check. There was a 4-story freestanding wall above it, and guess what happened? The wall came down, crushed the building, killed 2 guys. You know, so why were they in there? Should they have been in there? Were they sent in there? Did they go in by themselves? That's still unclear. But you know what? One thing was for sure. You got a 4-story freestanding wall up above you. What are you thinking? Stay away. Stay away. All right? Salvage. Got to be important to the IC. It's a lost art, right? We don't know. It's hard to do sometimes, right? Think like water. Should start early. Maybe start with pre-planning certain buildings, right? Assign a salvage group. Let that salvage group work throughout the building, all right? Don't forget your exposures. And remember with salvage, and even with working in an exposure building, we're actually trying to save the building. So let's not trash it in the process, you know? We get into an exposure, we want to like pull the ceilings. Well, before we do, maybe move some of the valuables away. You know, don't trash the place, we're trying to save the place. Same thing with salvage. Origin and cause, our responsibility. Everything has to be investigated for origin and cause, all right? But it's not a job for amateurs. If you make a call and you're not sure or you're not an expert in that, you can get eaten alive in court and really look stupid and humiliate your department and lawsuits and, you know, cats and dogs living together, mass hysteria, bad stuff, So, you know what? Call in somebody that actually knows what they're doing, all right? Consider suspending overhaul till it's complete. Check with the investigator. Hey, you want us to pull this stuff out or you want us not to? Maintain scene custody. This Michigan versus Tyler thing, really important. In this case, the fire department left the scene and then came back to get evidence. They came back the next day, 3 days later, a week later, and 3 weeks later. And they had left the scene. And a judge ruled it to be an illegal search and seizure. And he said, you can stay on the scene for a reasonable amount of time to conduct investigation. What's a reasonable amount of time?
Till you're done.
Till you're done. And who determines that? We do, right? Who breaks windows? We do. We're a fire department. We do whatever we want. Reasonable amount of time. We had a fire on the waterfront in Weehawken, and it was a 4-day investigation, and we had to hold the scene. Hold the scene. Don't let your people go. Don't leave the cops there because they're going to fall asleep in the cars and the place is going to rekindle. You don't want that. Once the fire department leaves, they have to have a warrant or consent to return. So this is a landmark case, and we're all held to this, right? The moral is stay till you finish the job. You're absolutely right. Stay till you finish the job, all right? Building marking systems, right? Should mark the buildings. Now, we had some issues in one of our towns because we marked so many buildings that were vacant to this one town. The mayor was like freaking out. So he actually went and had signs made that we actually put on the building that looked just like those, you know, which inadvertently he did us a favor because we didn't have to spray paint the buildings then and we could take the signs off. But, you know, at a glance, somebody's going to see this. You know, so if there's another fire the next day and there's no marking on a building and a roof's open or a floor's open, somebody could